Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Plugins for Dummies by a Dummy. Today's episode is all about our first plugin. We are actually going to do the famous Hello World, like it or not, but I believe it's the best place to start. So without further ado, welcome and let's get going. So back at Visual Studio, we are now going to embark on our first ever plugin, the alerts. If you remember my meme regarding the Hello World, I'm sure a lot of you will agree that the Hello World is not the most exciting thing to do. But at the same time, I personally believe that that is like the essential thing to understand. When you understand Hello World or alerts or logs, that's when you start understanding where you are in your code and what the code contains. So it's the absolute bare minimum of understanding of code to learn anything. All right, so it's going to be, this video is going to be 8 things that we're going to go through. And the first thing was the why alerts. I kind of gave you an example of that now. But then I'm just going to emphasize it even more. You understand alerts, you understand code. Once you understand what you're getting, that's when you understand where you're doing a mistake, because you will be making mistakes here. But in our course right now, we are going to just copy paste. And if you copy paste exactly what I have here, just follow my exact steps, we will succeed in creating our plugins, okay? So let's start off by opening up GitHub. So in the simple plugin in my repos here, we find a folder called simple plugin. And there's a folder called courses and alerts. What we're going to do here is just copy this, bring it on over to our project. So I'm just going to open that here now. And I'm going to copy everything, mark everything and paste. So there is a lot of code here, and you will start asking yourself, like, what do I need to understand? Well, not that much, to be honest. Eventually, you'll start understanding and asking more questions. I was doing lots of questions to ChatGPT, and it was giving me lots of answers. That's kind of how I got where I am today. But if we start off by looking on top here, just leave as is. Sorry, just accept. It's just like that. The namespace, accept it. This, just accept it. This is just how it is. I will get to that when we get more advanced eventually. Again, these things, all of this, just leave it be. Don't care about it. Don't worry about it. This right here is what we're going to worry about right now. That is the actual code running. And this code is going to alert or log this string of text here. You are awesome. Congratulations on the first plugin. If you're familiar with JavaScript, this would be a similar thing to do in JavaScript. But JavaScript is a front end, so that will sort of pop up to the end user using the system, while this right here is back end. So there's a bit different way of getting that. Okay, next step, signing code. So for signing the code, we need to right click here on the simple plugin, properties, and go over here to signing. We are going to do new. Doesn't matter what you call it. Again, a real developer might say something else, but for our simple stuff right now, it does not matter. We do not need a password for this, just click OK. If you do not get this, or if you get an error message while doing this, open it Visual Studio in admin mode, and this should be fine. So let's go ahead and close that. And next step, compiling code. Okay, so compiling code is a bit weird because this is kind of what makes Visual Studio and not Visual Studio Code. But we click on the right click on top here and we're going to build a solution. What it does is compiles the code we have here and creates a file called simpleplugin.dll. So understanding the file structure, we'll get into that, but again, I'm just going to say it's just like that, because as you can see here, it goes under the folder we have for the simple plugin, then simple plugin, then bin, then debug. That's a folder. Under the debug folder, that's our plugin. It's one of those things where you can ask me why. I will never have an answer to that. For a developer, it might make sense. I can't make sense of it, but I accept it. And that's just kind of where the plugin file will always be. So, next step, uploading the code. To upload the code, we are going to head on over to Xrm Toolbox and into the tool called Plugin Registration. So as you can see here, I am connected to my environment. And within my environment, there will be lots of plugins. Those are standard from Microsoft. This is a pure CDS environment, Dataverse environment. And they're just lots of plugins. That's just how it is, okay? There's nothing bad about that. There are even more when you go into a first-party application CRM system, because most of the first-party applications bring a lot of plugins. We're going to go ahead here and register the new assembly. And then we are going to find the DLL file. And the DLL file, as I said again, it is in the project and the bin debug. So if I go back here, just so you can see the navigation, you find your repos. That's where Visual Studio has stored your projects. You certainly need to find that. Open it. You open the plugin name. Within the plugin name, we go for the bin file, then the debug file, and that's where you find your simple plugin.dll. Again, that's just how it is. Open. We don't need to do anything more here. Actually, we're just going to register the plugin. So what you have done now is registered a plugin in the system. So there's now code. If I scroll all the way down here, there's now code in the system that you've deployed. Though, you got to think of this code the same way you think about classical workflows and Power Automate. Unless you call it, it does nothing. So there's code here, but it does nothing. So if I go back to CRM right now, our project within Dataverse, and I write something here, first alerts, and I click save, nothing happens because there's no trigger. Just the same way there would be in Power Automate or classic workflows. So what we need to do here is we're going to need to add a trigger, but they call it step here. So it's a bit different. And so we're going to go ahead and register a new step. In just the same way, if you look at the messages here, what message are we looking for? Well, update. Update. I just have to spell it correctly. So once we do the update message here, we could do create, we could do delete, we could do update. What entity are we working on? Well, the entities that I have given you in the solution are prefix plugin, and we're going to choose the main table. You understand the setup here. It's pretty much the same thing as a flow. And then we're going to do something called the filtering attributes. But first, we are just going to make sure everything is okay. I'm just going to click out of this field there, and then we can click this button. So I need to click out of the field, then we can do filtering attributes. Filtering attributes is basically saying what fields trigger the events. In this case, the alert text field triggers the event. Later on, we'll have a look into the other fields. Click OK. Again, I'm going to argue that this is pretty much like a flow or a classical workflow. We always have to define, or we should define what fields trigger. What is it, an update? Is it a create? Stuff like that. We can do the same things. And then register the step. Now, if we look at our code or our plugin, we're going to see that we have a plugin and we have a step. So the next time I go in and try to run something's going to happen. So let's go over and test our code. Okay, so the next step here is testing our code. And for that, we are going to open up the plugin trace viewer. What this tool does, very importantly, is it allows us to see the messages being sent on the server side of the system. What we're going to do now is going to go into the trace log settings here on top and do all and click OK. Now, if you're in a production environment, a larger production environment, you should never do this because it will basically punch out lots of messages for every single first party application or etc. etc. And if you do it, it's basically because you want to try to find an error, but remember to turn it off. It does cause a bit of traffic. But on our development environment, it does not matter. Just put it on. You could just as well leave it on because the whole purpose of this environment is basically just to test things out and try it out. So it doesn't matter if it's on. Further on, if you're in a complex environment, you can do lots of things here with different filters. We're not going to touch that today. We're just going to run everything. But what we need to do now is go into the app, the model-driven app, and we're going to do first alert logged. So when I click the save button here now, because of our trigger steps, this is going to write to the log file. And as you can see, I mean, JavaScript would have popped a message up here, but we got to go over to the backend part of the system to see what's happened. So if I go back to the plugin registration, the plugin trace viewer, and I click the retrieve logs, and just an FYI, this is an asynchronous service, so sometimes you have to click it a few times before something pops up. But eventually, if you've done it right, you should get a message here. And if you've done it incorrectly, you should also get a message here saying an error. But check this out. For our entity, the plugin main table, on a post operation, I'll get into all of these post operation, pre-operations things. Just do it as I say in the beginning, just to get going. Check that out. You are awesome. Congratulations on your first plugin. If you succeeded this step, be proud because you just delivered what some people call, I guess everyone is going to call a pro code solution. Everyone who talks about plugins in Dataverse or Dynamics are going to call them a pro dev, even though most people should call anything code JavaScript or PowerFX pro dev. Whole different discussion. But you know what? Right now, be proud that you've been able to create a plugin because this is the beginning of a journey. And even though we get into the whole sort of low code plugins and stuff like that, they might not cover all topics. So I do believe that this is something, if you really want to get into sort of what coding can do for you, it opens up a lot of opportunities. And this might be the answer. So anyway, tap yourself on the back or the shoulder. Well done. And stay tuned for the next video where we are going to look at integers. So thank you very much. Bye.